Sometimes a movie character is allotted a destiny they just didn't deserve. Now it's sometimes effective, sometimes bewildering. Whether it's a death from out of left field with or without dramatic purpose, or a needlessly convoluted death scene. Some characters' curtain calls are as head-scratching as they are tear-jerking. So setting aside the splatter genre where every character's departure is cruel and unusual then, here are just a few film fates for thought. Because I am Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are 10 movie characters that suffered unnecessarily cruel fates. Number 10, Hobin, Washburn, Serenity. Right then, if we're going to start now, we're going to start big. Almost 20 years on, and there is still no movie death that gets sci-fi fans a clucking in disbelief, half as much than that of Alan Tudyk's Hobin Washburn. In the climactic final act of the film, the crew of the eponymous ship try their darndest to evade a battle between the Alliance and the Reavers. Wash, like an absolute boss, pilots Serenity out of harm's way and crash lands, saving all our friends' lives in the process. What a hero. And then he gets impaled by a bloody big spear, and he dies instantly. And all of that in front of his wife, damn it. Oh, come on. That's that, and that is that. Firefly's most affable and warm-hearted mainstay gone in an instant. If the death had come at a different point in the film, it could have been used as a crutch to spur our heroes on to great things. But sadly, that's not what we were given. He just went. A pitiless reminder that life is a precious gift that can be snatched away at any given moment, no matter how popular you are. Number 9, Eddie Carr, The Lost World, Jurassic Park. Like Wash, Eddie Carr is another entry in the chronicles of people who are brutally killed after doing something really heroic. Picture the scene. A juvenile T-Rex is taken into a portakabin. The little lizard's mum and dad visit said portakabin and, understandably, are a bit peeved to see their little snookums inside. Upon reuniting with Baby Rex, they proceed to destroy the portakabin in retribution. Dangling perilously from a cliff, the people inside appear all but doomed. And that's when Eddie Carr shows up, saving our foolish, let's face it, heroes using a winch from his Jeep. And he is promptly devoured by Mummy and Daddy Rex for his efforts. Right then, now it's not so much Eddie's death that rankles, it's the graphic dismemberment that's the clincher. Eddie is tossed in the air like a ragdoll and torn limb from limb by the two angry dinosaurs, while the camera just lingers on every second. And all for what? Saving some people's lives, that's what. Heroes deserve a dignified departure, and Eddie Carr was shortchanged not to get one. And while we're talking about deaths in the Jurassic Park/World series, I want to know, what do you think's the worst of all time? You let me know in the comment section down below. Number 8, Tracy Bond on Her Majesty's Secret Service. So our old pal Jimmy Bond got hitched, eh? Who'd have thunk it? He's finally been tamed by an incredible woman and she's made an honest man out of him. Good for him, eh? Well done, pats on backs all round. You have given me a wedding present, says Tracy to her husband just minutes after being wed. The best I could have, a future. Oh boy, alarm bells, they're ringing. No movie character ever sets up such an opportunity for irony without a payoff. Yep, and sure enough, along came Blofeld and Irma Blunt with a machine gun, and that's the end of Mrs. Bond. A poignant, heart-wrenching and well-acted final scene that had all the potential to feed the hero's character growth over the ensuing series. Instead though, right from the get-go of the next film, we were treated to the same old Bond, bawdy quips and incurable womanizing. The cold-blooded murder of the only woman Bond had ever truly loved could have been a springboard for the growth of 007 into the troubled, desolate man hell-bent on revenge depicted in Ian Fleming's source material. Sadly though, the producers, and perhaps audiences too, had other ideas. Within the confines of this single film, the scene is dramatically very effective, and George Lazenby and Diana Rigg's performances are quite moving, but in an overall context, the murder had little visible impact on James Bond, rendering Tracy's untimely death inconsequential. Number 7, Anna, Nicole, Kenneth and Terry, Dawn of the Dead. Less a full part of the story, more a reward for those of us who sit in the cinema till the house lights come up. The fate of the 4 survivors and their dog Chips is shown in a found footage package spliced between the end credits of Zack Snyder's really quite good remake of George A. Romero's zombie classic. Until that point, we'd seen these characters shoot, blast and chainsaw their way through hell just to survive. And seeing them sail off on a yacht into the distance after a climactic and, in human life terms, expensive final battle was a bit of a relief really. Much like the original, in which the surviving characters escaped in a helicopter at the end, we were rooting for these guys skies and hoping a better future lay ahead. But old Zacky boy had different ideas, didn't he? Instead of hope, we were left with despair as a sudden shift in tone hurled us aboard that boat. Maggot-infested food, snarling severed zombie heads, and an angry Ving Rhames were the least of their trouble, as they landed on a jetty only to be attacked by a horde of hungry undead. Though no deaths were shown on screen, it's pretty clear that no one was making it out of that one intact. And after all they'd been through, man, it breaks your heart. Number 6, Mary, Aliens. Initially credited as Cocooned Woman, Barbara Cole's Mary is doomed to one of the most gut-wrenching fates in the entire Alien franchise. While scouting the processing station on LV-426, the company of Marines discover the whereabouts of the planet's colonizers. They're all cocooned at the center of the station, all of them dead. Except for one, that is, Mary the Cocooned Woman. For a peripheral character to have such a gruesome death, it makes an audience realize that absolutely nothing is off the table. And imagining what happened in the days preceding her capture makes it even more grim, really. Poor Mary must have watched her friends die one by one, aliens bursting from their chests as she looks helplessly on, knowing the same fate eventually awaits her. Upon being discovered, she begs to be killed and Apone duly obliges, torching her and the baby alien with her. It is interesting that this fate is reserved for a minor character with less than a minute of screen time, but it's even more interesting when you realize that there is a deleted scene of Paul Reiser's duplicitous and cowardly Berg meeting the exact same misfortune, cocooned and in agony. One character elicits sympathy, the other arguably deserves it. Thanks for choosing to spend a bit of time with us today at What Culture. Now go and hit that subscribe button down below for more of this kind of stuff on your screen. Now back to the video. Number 5, Cedric Diggory, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Despite Harry having first-hand knowledge of just what absolute gittery Voldemort was capable of, it wasn't until the climactic moments of the 4th installment of his saga that our wizarding hero witnessed pure evil in all its harrowing glory. Upon being whisked to a distant graveyard via a portkey, Harry and Cedric are accosted by Peter Pettigrew, carrying the shrunken he who must not be named in his arms like some withered Cabbage Patch doll. I mean, just look at him. Kill the spare, the mini Dark Lord orders. And that right there is the end of poor Cedric. No brave battle, no courageous defiance, just straight up cold-blooded murder. The scene works because it serves to highlight to Harry and to the audience really, that Voldemort and his minions are willing to perpetrate the worst acts imaginable, even going so far as to kill an innocent schoolboy. But the last words that Cedric hears remind him that he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, truly a spare. And Harry's trajectory and his overall objective remained unchanged, marking Cedric's death as just an unfortunate coincidence as heartbreaking as it is avoidable. Number 4, Carla Jean Moss, No Country for Old Men. I knowed you was crazy when I saw you sitting there, says a resolute Carla Jean to her eventual killer. I knowed exactly what was in store for me. Refusing to play along with Anton Chigurh's coin toss ritual, she tells the assassin that the decision to murder is his and his alone, not the result of the flip of a quarter. Chigurh leaves the house, checking his shoes for blood, suggesting that Carla Jean should maybe have just hedged a bet. Up until this showdown with the film's antagonist, poor Carla Jean, played to perfection by Kelly MacDonald, had not had first-hand experience of the action that led to any consequence. Everything that preceded this was the architecture of someone else, whether it was her husband's pride or her mother's loose lips. The instant Llewellyn decided to take the money, he'd sealed his own fate, and in doing so set up a chain of events that would lead to the execution of his innocent bereaved wife. But Carla Jean's reminder that Chigurh could just as easily decide not to kill her is the central tragedy of this story. She is collateral damage of the highest order. But the villain had made a promise, and despite the man he made that promise to being long dead, he decided to make a victim of the film's most morally uncompromised character. What a bastard. Number 3, Edward Delacroix, The Green Mile. There is room for nuance in the argument for this one, as we are after all talking about the final moments of a man convicted for committing horrific crimes. But upon watching the agonizingly drawn out, torturous demise of Michael Jeter's Edward Delacroix, I defy you not to feel desperately sorry for the poor bugger. In the film version of this Stephen King novella, Del is rendered as a meek, kind, gentle man who has befriended his prison guards. He also takes care of a mouse called Mr. Jingles, who becomes Del's main source of joy as he awaits his execution. execution, Del's crimes aren't specifically alluded to in the film. In the book, he had perpetrated some ghastly things. So the character we are introduced to is an affable, diminutive chap with a benevolent manner and a thick Acadian accent. He is, to all intents and purposes, a quote-unquote nice guy here. Seeing this man bullied, beaten, and abused by the film's chief villainous figure, the sadistic guard Percy, is one thing, but watching him slowly fry to death is definitely another. Percy purposefully neglects to wet the sponge that will conduct electricity straight to the brain for an instant death, and in doing so gives us one of the most distressing few minutes in movie history. I mean, no one deserves to go out like that. When Paul and Brutus force Percy to watch his handiwork, they force us to watch it too, every gut-churning moment. Number 2, Zara, Jurassic World. Another Jurassic death. And possibly the answer to the question that I asked you earlier. In Steven Spielberg's 1993 masterpiece Jurassic Park, the characters who were picked off by dinosaurs all created their own demises by displaying cowardice, greed, hubris, and foolishness respectively. I mean, you didn't want to see them go, but you knew that someone had to, and you were satisfied that the characters who were in it more for themselves than for the team said bye-bye first. 22 years later, well, it was all change. Zara, played by Katie McGrath, doesn't really display any of those characteristics. In fact, she doesn't have much of a character at all. She's just glued to her phone, really. Her death scene, though, remains memorable as she is mauled, pecked, clawed, and hurled through the air by pterodactyls before being swallowed whole by a mosasaurus. In terms of film deaths, this really is one that should be reserved for a proper villain. Zara's not that, is she? If she's guilty of anything, it's being a mediocre babysitter. Maybe texting too much, but yeah, that's it. The appallingly protracted death of a non-villainous supporting character is so unreasonable, it makes you want to question the filmmaker's views on both mobile phone use in public, and well, women in general. Even the film's main antagonist, Vincent D'Onofrio's Vic Hoskins, is afforded an off-camera quietus. A baffling end to a character that's actually quite uncomfortable to watch, and not in a good way. Number 1, David Drayton, The Mist. For a movie fate that is avoidable but dramatically very effective, look no further than the final moments of one of the greatest horror films of the 21st century, Frank Darabont's ensemble-driven adaptation of Stephen King's The Mist. It's Tom Jane's survivor David who gets the entry onto this list, rather than the 4 people he shoots in the head. Realizing his small band of escapees have no hope of evading the monsters lurking in the mist, he must do the unthinkable. Using the only 4 bullets he has left, he euthanizes his 4 passengers, including his own son, sparing them any agony before bravely sacrificing himself to whatever gory demise is heading his way. But then, the mist clears and the army emerge, survivors in tow. Watching David sink to his knees in despair as he screams to the heavens is never anything less than heartrending. And knowing that if he'd waited just another minute or 2, his son would be alive, and he wouldn't be bearing the burden of having killed them for ultimately no reason. A truly tragic, harrowing ending, beautifully shot, acted, and scored. Now that's how you end a movie.